This video is brought to you by Grandeur Warranty, your #1 online source for factory-backed extended warranties in the country.
Today we finally get our first opportunity to get behind the wheel of the most exciting new Ford Maverick, that is this Lobo. If you haven't already seen, this Lobo is a new street performance version of the Ford Maverick. And that's pretty cool because it's a little retro. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, there were tons of street performance trucks, and that's been gone from the market for a while, but the Ford Maverick is bringing it back a little bit with this Lobo. Looking at it from the exterior, a lot less cladding here on the Lobo than a standard Maverick. So this is a unique front fascia. There's also this unique grille in the front. That's something that in photos, I wasn't sure exactly how I felt about this grille design, but seeing it in person, I've warmed up to it a bit. Also blacked out Ford logos, and around the side, this is easily the coolest styling element on this truck. It's a turbofan style wheel, so almost like some of those rally cars that we love from back in the day. And the wheel has a slightly different design to give you a bit more room around your valve when you're airing up the tires. But I love how big the face of this wheel is and perfectly smooth. When I walked up to it for the first time, I just wanted to do a little bit of that. Maybe that's just me. But this Lobo package is not only styling elements. That's the first thing that you see when you walk up to the truck, but underneath the skin, they've done quite a few things to actually make this truck higher performance. For one, they've given it a quicker ratio steering. They've also given it bigger, badder brakes, and they've lowered the truck as well, about a ½ inch in the front and a little over an inch in the rear to give it a sportier stance. And the rear differential on this truck is a very similar setup to what we've got in the Tremor version of the Ford Maverick. So this truck can do some torque vectoring, and you can put it in a special Lobo mode that lets you have a little bit more fun in track driving scenarios. Under the hood of the Lobo lives a familiar 2-liter EcoBoost engine with 237 horsepower, 277 pound-feet of torque. And unlike a lot of other Mavericks, this doesn't have an 8-speed, but instead a 7-speed. So they've actually changed up even the transmission on this a little bit. They say to space out the gear ratios to make this a better setup for spirited driving. So right now we have a little autocross setup here in the Lobo, which is pretty sweet. We get to see how a little bit of spirited driving in this truck feels, because this is a little bit of what it's designed to do. It's still a small, compact, and efficient pickup truck, but it's one that's fun enough to drive that you can get in, do a little autocross, and you might not be setting any world records, especially with me behind the wheel, but it's still good enough handling that it's pretty fun to drive. Surprisingly so. You can give it a little bit of throttle and even have the back end step out a little bit thanks to the torque vectoring differential at the rear of this truck. Suspension pretty tight, not tons of body roll for something with a bed behind it. I'm actually pretty impressed here with the Maverick. Again, it's not the greatest sounding engine in the world, not the soundtrack of performance that you get from the Mustang or anything, but this truck can hold its own on a little autocross. It actually feels pretty well set up for this. I'm trying not to hit any cones. I think I'm okay so far. I'm definitely not an autocrosser, but I could see getting into it if you had a vehicle like this to drive on it. It's pretty sweet. Pretty cool. This Maverick is a fun little truck. This truck could not be more different from the hybrid all-wheel drive in its attitude and driving characteristics. We've got the hybrid all-wheel drive, and that would not be particularly exciting in that truck, but it's entertaining in this one. Modern trucks are not cheap. on average. And if you're going to invest in a brand new pickup truck, we highly recommend you protect that investment by getting a Grainger extended warranty. Grainger is an absolutely huge provider of these extended warranties, so if you want to protect everything under the hood with your powertrain, the electronics, and more on your investment, definitely get a Grainger warranty, because you can even save an average of $1,000 getting one of those warranties. Check out the link below and get yourself one. Now, one thing that might not appeal to everyone, but oddly enough is kind of appealing to me, is the way that they've mounted this license plate off-center rather than having such an intentional looking cutout for the license plate. It just looks a little bit unique, and I kind of like that. But there is one sacrifice here with the Lobo version of the Maverick. We've got about 1,016 pounds of payload on this particular truck, which is not too bad, especially for a truck of this size. But towing is limited to 2,000 pounds on the Lobo, because it is a pretty heavily modified version of the Maverick. So you can't get the max tow package that gets you 4,000 pounds of towing like you can on some other Mavericks. The bed on this Ford Maverick is pretty standard, just a basic tailgate, nothing dampened, nothing too fancy. And we've got a 4.5-foot bed. It's of course a pretty small cargo area, but this is a pretty small truck. However, they've still given us some pretty useful features in here. We've got 8 tie downs, and the ones mounted to these rails at the top of the bed are movable, so you can slide them back and forth depending on where you need to tie down anything in your bed, which is pretty cool. We've also got power in this bed, 400 watts of it, and this truck does also give you some cargo lights, so you can press that button. The light right there on the side comes on, and the lights on your center high mount stoplight will come on as well. In the bed of the Maverick, we've also got a little cubby that, interestingly enough, you can pull this bottom piece out and make even deeper. We're merging onto the highway in the Lobo and taking the on-ramp with a little bit of speed. And for a little pickup truck, it handles okay. Giving it some throttle. I gotta say, the acceleration, actually not bad. And there is a hint of turbo noise, which I appreciate. Overall, it's not the best sounding vehicle ever made, because it's just a little 2-liter 4-cylinder. But when you get a hint of that turbo whistle, it makes it a bit more fun. I've got paddle shifters on the steering wheel. Paddle shifters are nice to have. You can click through the gears. Not the most satisfying paddle shifters to use. They don't move very far. They're a little plasticky. Doesn't give you a ton of feel or feedback. But we have to keep in mind that we're talking about a relatively entry-level pickup truck. So this is not a Raptor R. This is not anything that's an insane top-of-the-line performance truck that costs $100,000. And for what this truck is, it's a fun truck to drive. Some of the highway surface that we're driving over is not the smoothest surface in the world, and for this truck having a lowered suspension, it really doesn't ride that poorly. We have the standard hybrid Maverick as a company vehicle that we've been testing out for the last couple months, and this is not significantly less comfortable than that. So for the looks and the styling that you get with this Lobo, you're not sacrificing much in the way of comfort. Visibility in the Maverick is good. Our mirrors are good. It's an easy vehicle to operate, but there is a bit more road noise than I would expect, and over really long distances that could get to be a little tiring. The Lobo interior gives us a mix of what I'd argue is both good and bad. Some of the good, these seats. It says Lobo here on the backrest, and we've got contrast stitching in 2 different colors, both blue and yellow. And the same is true on the steering wheel, which does make this interior feel a little bit more special. So I appreciate the addition of a little bit of color on the interior, as well as some different textures, angles, and designs. You've got texture here underneath the screen. We've got it On the center of the dash, some exposed hardware, even some interesting shapes molded into the dash material. But materials is what I would say is the low point. There are some cheap feeling hard plastics here that tell me this is a little bit of a budget vehicle, and I don't think that that's out of the ordinary, but it is worth noting. For shifting the Maverick, kind of like on the Bronco Sport, we have this rotary dial. Not a huge deal, pretty easy to get used to. It's not everyone's favorite thing, but I wouldn't say it's any issue. There's also an electronic switch for the parking brake. It would be fun if the Maverick Lobo gave us a similar parking brake control that the Mustang gets you, that lets you slide the back end around a little bit, but it's just a standard control here on the Lobo. In front of me, a relatively small digital instrument cluster. You do get configurability with this screen, good information, temperature and fuel to the side of the digital portion. But when you look at that screen and then you look at the center screen, you notice that the center screen is much higher resolution, higher contrast, makes the instrument cluster look a little cheap by comparison. This, however, a 13.2 inch screen, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all the connectivity, and it's really sharp. Your climate controls are integrated into the screen, and I wouldn't mind it if we instead had physical buttons dedicated to the climate controls, but this is still responsive, it's still pretty easy to use, so it's not any huge issue. Below that, because the climate controls are built into the screen, it's cleaned up the dash a little bit. We've got a volume control, a few more dedicated buttons for some of the switches that you use very often, and Pro Trailer Backup Assist as well. So if you're hooked up to what is going to have to be a relatively small trailer because of the maximum towing capability of this Lobo, you can still use Pro Trailer Backup Assist to help you get that trailer reversed wherever you need it to be. Below that, got a USB-C, USB-A, rear window control here to slide that open, and a wireless charger as well. Sitting behind myself, or attempting to anyway, in the Ford Maverick, it's no surprise this is a pretty small back seat. Even most mid-sized trucks have small back seats, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend this as a road trip vehicle for 4 or 5 adults, but you could theoretically do it. There are that many seats and seat belts. My knees are kind of up against the back of the seat. It's scalloped a little bit, so it's not too bad. My headroom's okay, but I'm only about 5'10", and if I were much taller like some of the other guys at the office, I might come pretty close to that roof. I also don't have any climate vents here in the rear seat, so on a really hot day or a really cold day, you're gonna be lacking some of that airflow that you might wanna have, but there is charging back here, 2 USB-Cs and a larger 120 volt outlet. What the Lobo does really well is give you a fun foundation of some good looks and some entertaining driving characteristics, a decent bit of power, the ability to go through the gears with your paddle shifters, a little bit of fun turbo noise, decent handling, and it doesn't sacrifice much of the practicality that draws a lot of people to the Maverick initially in order to give you some fun driving. And that's a really good combination because the Maverick is just a very practical, useful vehicle. It's one that we've seen used by a lot of local companies as company vehicles to do a little bit of landscaping, this, that, and the other, because they're pretty fuel efficient, especially fuel efficient if you get the standard hybrid version, but even relatively so here with the 2-liter EcoBoost. You can haul around some basic stuff, nothing too much. You can pull a small trailer, and you can still do that here with the Lobo. So it's a really good balance between something that's entertaining to be in, entertaining to drive, and you can still justify buying it when you need a vehicle that's also practical. All in all, the Lobo version of the Maverick is a lot of fun. Love the way that it looks, love that you still get some pretty decent functionality. You can put 5 people in it if you need to, in a pinch. Still got a decent sized bed, and you can pull a small trailer. Decent enough fuel economy, all-wheel drive, so it works in any weather conditions, and it's fun looking, and it's fun to drive. So a lot that the Lobo has going for it. These start around $35,000, which in today's world of trucks is not too bad, but depending on how many options you stack on top of that, and it's probably gonna be at least a few, you can get it all the way up to $45,000, and another $10,000 in features does start making these a little bit pricey. So let me know in the comments below, do you think that this Lobo is worth the money? And is this something that you could see yourself driving? That's all for this video, and we'll see you in the next.